that really changes our understanding of that place, we'll change that. But we can't we don't have the staffing capacity, frankly, to continually be amending these things. There are other forums, such as public education, where that should be occurring, or in the halls of academia, or in historical societies, or in exhibitions, where that you can dig more deeply. This is, as I say, meant to be a synopsis of the principal characteristics and historical development of a given park, and so forth.
So if you said a particularly interesting or salient historical fact, to whom would someone who said they had that, how would it be you that would need to be convinced?
Yes, at this juncture, we would very much like to keep on record any of the information that you or your students come upon in a mass, because we have secondary files where this will be useful information. I would suggest that it be kept also elsewhere in logical repositories, perhaps, if this is a research project in the Bronx, for instance, with the Bronx Historical Society, depending on the capacity, too, of the municipal records people, but probably not the municipal records people. And the reason is the city doesn't even have the capacity entirely to take care of the documents it generates itself. We're not a museum. We're not a cultural institution. For instance, if somebody offered us a fabulous photo collection tomorrow of Bronx parks, we wouldn't necessarily accept that, because we simply don't have the physical capacity to do so, to organize it, and to make it retrievable for scholars in the future. We do oversee the photographs taken by the Parks Department photographers, and that is the basis, in large part, of our photography archive, which we hold the negatives going back to 1934. Prior to that time, we have a small collection of about 2,000 images, which were used to illustrate our annual reports. Those were first made into copy negatives and reference prints with the photo archive in the early to mid-1990s, and more recently have been scanned. Also, the actual reports have been scanned and posted on the Parks Department website, where you can look at annual reports of the Parks Department from 1857 to 1931, as well as the minutes of the commissioners, as well as press releases from a subsequent era, commencing with the consolidation of the Parks Department in 1934.
Are those the documents you showed us before? Those are some reports?
Yes, okay. and also the press releases, which are press releases, and so they do have a somewhat of a publicity promotional function, but they still give you clues about where to look and when things happened. Knowing that a park got restored at a given moment will then give you ideas of where to go elsewhere. Drawings and plans of parks prior to 1934 are in large part, should they exist, stored with the municipal archives. We turned over a collection that was previously on a loan basis by Avery Library at Columbia for decades, but in the 1980s the city took back that collection because it was the city's collection, and they went to the municipal archives. They have documented that in both color and black and white transparencies, as well as microfilm and digital formats at this point. Any maps and plans, renderings for parks after that are held by the department's map file division. This is an active working file
in Queens.
That are, you know, again. So you know, that's an important resource too. Though we don't have as great a capacity as we might like to just accommodate an unlimited number of researchers. It's an active file. It's used for when we restore a park. It's used by our designers. You would be surprised that certain parks don't have as-built plans. At one point I was working on a temporary art project for Bryant Park, and we needed to figure out where we were going to place these pieces. This is about 5 years ago, and I discovered that there were no as-built plans of Bryant Park as it exists right now, and I had to request that the Bryant Park Corporation commission as-built plans, because they had not been commissioned when the park was restored, even though the $20 million reconstruction had occurred in the late 1980s and early 1990s. There was no records of that reconstruction. Where the conduits were, where the electricals were, where the plants were, where the paths were.
Maybe they didn't fill out the right permits.
So we were able to do that, and those do exist. They actually have been rather responsible. They even have an in-house archivist, as does the Prospect Park Alliance. Those are the only two nonprofit organizations I know of. Not even the Central Park Conservancy.
They don't have one?
Has they do have a photographer who has quite a vast historic knowledge, but doesn't have professional archival training. The only two entities I know of are Project Park Alliance and Bryant Park, who have a sort of a shadow government archivist, Amy Peck, out at the Prospect Park Alliance.
Cool.
So, I mean, the Drake Cemetery, simply as an example, though, is, again, it's an inherited, it predates the park, clearly, as does the Vault Hill in Van Cortlandt Park, for instance. The department did take over, in a nominal way, the jurisdiction of a number of other cemeteries that were private cemeteries that had defaulted along the way in the city. Rather than destroying them altogether, the city took them over, first under the Department of General Services, later under the Department of Citywide Administrative Services, and then they were reassigned to parks as parkland. I think Old West Farms and Remsen in the Bronx are two that exist there.